Burma Jungle 1944. The jungle of Burma was alive. Not with beauty but with danger. Tall trees blocked the sky. Thick green leaves trapped heat and sweat. Mud pulled at boots like hands trying to drag men down. Every sound felt loud. Every shadow felt alive. It was 1944. World War II was burning across Asia. British and Allied soldiers moved carefully through the jungle, their faces tired, their uniforms dirty. They had been fighting for days. Food was low. Ammunition was running out. And now the enemy was too close. A British officer raised his hand. "Stop," he whispered. The soldiers froze. From far away, faint voices echoed through the trees. Japanese soldiers. Many of them. Too many. The officer checked his map with shaking fingers. Then he looked up at his men. His face turned pale. "We can't hold this position," he said quietly. "We are outnumbered." Another officer nodded. "If we stay, we die." A few seconds passed. Then the order came. "Retreat. Fall back now." The word spread fast. Soldiers turned and began to move back through the jungle. Some ran. Some limped. Fear pushed them forward. But not everyone moved. One man stayed behind. He was a Gurkha soldier. Shorter than most. Quiet. Come. His rifle rested against his shoulder. A curved knife, a kukri, hung at his side. He did not run. He did not speak. He simply stood there. The officer turned back and shouted, "Gurkha! Move now." "That's an order." The Gurkha did not answer. Another soldier looked at him and whispered, "Is he wounded?" "No," someone replied. "He looks fine." The officer ran closer. "Are you deaf?" he shouted. "The Japanese are coming." The Gurkha slowly turned his head. His face showed no fear. No panic. Only focus. The officer felt a strange chill. "You'll be killed," the officer said, lowering his voice. "There are hundreds of them." The Gurkha finally spoke. His voice was calm. Almost soft. "I will stay." The officer stared at him. "Why?" The Gurkha did not explain. Behind them the jungle rustled. Branches snapped. The enemy was close now. The officer clenched his jaw. "Fine," he said. "You're mad. Completely mad." He turned and ran. Other soldiers followed, shaking their heads. "Poor man," one said. "He's lost his mind." "Or his courage," another whispered. Soon they were gone. The Gurkha was alone. The jungle became quiet again. He took a deep breath. Slowly he removed his rifle and checked it. Only a few bullets left. Not enough for what was coming. Then his hand moved to the kukri. The blade was curved, sharp, heavy. This was not just a knife. It was tradition. It was honor. The Gurkha crouched low and moved into the shadows. He knew this jungle. Every sound. Every smell. Every path. Minutes passed. Then he heard them. Japanese soldiers moved forward in groups. Confident. Loud. They believed the enemy had run away. One officer laughed. "They are afraid," he said. They did not know they were being watched. The Gurkha climbed into thick bushes above a narrow path. His breathing slowed. His body became still. The first Japanese soldier walked below him. Then the second. Then more. The Gurkha waited. He did not rush. He did not panic. When the moment came, he moved like lightning. One quick strike. One silent kill. The body fell into the bushes without a sound. Another soldier turned, confused. Too late. The jungle swallowed the noise. The rest of the Japanese unit stopped. "Did you hear that?" one asked. Silence. Only the sound of insects. They laughed nervously and kept walking. High above them, the Gurkha disappeared deeper into the trees. This was no longer a retreat. This was a hunt. Far away, British soldiers stopped and looked back. They heard a scream. Then another. Then silence again. The officer frowned. "What is happening back there?" someone asked. No one answered. In the dark jungle of Burma, one man stood against an army. And the enemy had no idea what they had walked into. The question was no longer why he refused to retreat. The real question was, how many would fall before the jungle went quiet again? The jungle seemed alive. Every leaf, every branch, every shadow was part of it. The Gurkha moved slowly, almost like he was part of the jungle itself. He did not run. He did not shout. He simply walked, careful and quiet, his kukri in one hand, rifle slung over his shoulder. He was alone now. All his comrades had retreated. Only he remained, standing against the approaching tide of Japanese soldiers. He knew the numbers. He knew their weapons. Yet he did not hesitate. The Gurkha's eyes were sharp. Every movement in the undergrowth, every crack of a twig, every rustle of a leaf, he noticed. He could hear the enemy's whispers, their confidence, their arrogance. They thought they were superior. They thought a single man could not stop them. But they had no idea what they faced. He remembered the stories of his ancestors, Gurkhas who had fought empires and armies. He remembered his father's words. A Gurkha does not run. A Gurkha does not beg for mercy. A Gurkha fights even alone. The first group of Japanese soldiers came into view. They were laughing, joking, thinking the jungle was empty. One kicked a branch carelessly. Another spat on the ground. They moved in loose formation, confident, unaware of the danger above them. The Gurkha crouched in the bushes on a small hill overlooking the path. He took a deep breath. His heart was steady. His mind was calm. Every step, every movement had been calculated. Then he struck. The first soldier did not even see him. One strike of the kukri and he was down. Silent. Invisible. The second soldier spun around. The Gurkha was already gone. The undergrowth swallowed him. Another strike. Another soldier fell. Screams echoed briefly, then silence. The rest of the Japanese unit froze. They could not understand. They were trained, disciplined, but they were facing something they could not explain. The Gurkha moved like a shadow. He did not stop. Every move was precise. Every kill was swift. He was not just fighting. He was sending a message. Do not underestimate a Gurkha. Hours passed. The jungle grew darker, the sun filtered weakly through thick leaves. The Gurkha rested briefly on a fallen log. Sweat ran down his face, mud covered his boots, but he did not feel tired. His mind was focused, every sense alert. From afar he could hear the Japanese soldiers regrouping. They were confused, shouting orders he could not understand, calling for their officers. They thought the jungle had tricks. They thought the sounds were from animals. But the Gurkha knew better. A large group moved cautiously through the trees. This time they were more careful. They spread out looking for him. The Gurkha observed them. He planned his moves. He would not attack recklessly. Patience was his weapon. One soldier stepped on a dry branch. Snap. The sound echoed. The group stopped. The Gurkha was already moving, climbing higher into a tree. Another quick strike, another soldier fell. Panic spread through the Japanese ranks. They were no longer confident. They whispered among themselves, fear creeping in. Is there more than one? One asked. No, it's just one man, another replied. Impossible, he is only one. But the impossible was happening. The Gurkha continued his silent war. Every step, every kill, every move was calculated to confuse and terrify. He used the terrain. Thick roots, fallen logs, and low branches became his weapons. The jungle itself became his ally. By evening, he had stopped only to take a sip of water from a small stream. He looked at the bodies below. He did not feel joy. He did not smile. He simply observed. Every life lost was a story, a soldier who had believed they were invincible. But the Gurkha was not just a soldier. He was a symbol. A reminder of courage. A reminder of honor. From a distance, British soldiers paused to watch. They could see smoke from the enemy's campfires. They could hear the chaos. They could not believe one man could hold his ground. Some whispered, he must be a spirit. A ghost. But the Gurkha was no ghost. He was flesh and blood. He was real. Night fell. The jungle became darker. The sounds of the Japanese soldiers grew tense. They whispered. They were afraid to move. Every shadow could be the Gurkha. Every rustle could mean death. The Gurkha moved silently among them. He did not need numbers. He did not need reinforcements. His mind was sharp. His hands were steady. His kukri was deadly. One by one, soldiers fell into confusion. Their formation broke. Their morale dropped. They were no longer hunters. They were being hunted. The Gurkha crouched on a high branch, looking down at the chaos. He could hear their cries, their confusion, their fear. He did not gloat. He simply observed, ready for the next move. The legend of the lone Gurkha had begun. The enemy would remember this night. They would tell stories of a man who moved like a shadow, struck like a storm, and vanished like the wind. But the Gurkha did not think of legend. He only thought of survival. And honor. Because in the jungle of Burma, 1944, there was no room for hesitation. No room for fear. There was only the lone warrior, standing against the tide, ready to face the impossible. The jungle grew darker as the sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long between the trees, creating a maze of green and black. Every sound echoed. Every rustle was a warning. The Gurkha moved silently, blending into the thick undergrowth. His kukri was ready in one hand, rifle slung across his back. He was calm, patient, watching, waiting. He did not chase the enemy. No, he would make them come to him. The Japanese soldiers were getting restless. Their earlier confidence had vanished like mist. They whispered nervously, scanning the dense foliage. "This way," one officer shouted, pointing ahead. "The forest is empty. They are gone." They did not know the truth. The forest was far from empty. The Gurkha had planned his trap carefully. The jungle was his ally. Fallen trees, twisted roots, and thick vines were more than obstacles. They were weapons. Narrow paths became channels. Small clearings became killing grounds. Every step the enemy took brought them closer to danger. He crouched behind a thick tree, his eyes watching a small clearing below. A group of Japanese soldiers was moving in, thinking they were safe. They laughed softly, voices low but still confident. They did not see the kukri glinting from above. One soldier stepped on a dry branch. Snap! The sound cracked through the air. The Gurkha waited. His body barely moved. Every muscle tense. His mind calm, focused. Then, like a striking cobra, he leapt. The first enemy soldier fell silently. Another tried to raise his rifle, but the Gurkha was already on him. The kukri flashed in the dim light. One strike, two strikes, then silence. The other soldiers panicked. They did not know where the attacks were coming from. Shadows moved. Leaves rustled. The ground seemed to shift beneath them. They tried to regroup, but the trap had already been set. The path ahead narrowed, flanked by fallen trees and thick roots. They had no choice but to continue. The Gurkha moved along the high branches, invisible. From above, he could see the enemy soldiers stumble into the channel he had created. The first few fell to the ground, their screams swallowed by the jungle. Others froze, looking around in terror. Is it just one man?" One whispered, voice trembling. "Yes, impossible but one," another replied. The Gurkha smiled faintly, not for pride but for focus. He struck again. The kukri found its mark silently, quickly, leaving no time for the enemy to react. The screams were short, then gone. Hours passed. Darkness deepened. The Japanese soldiers were trapped. The jungle, once their enemy, now became their nightmare. Every sound, every shadow, every movement threatened them. The Gurkha moved like the wind. One soldier tried to climb a tree for a better view. The Gurkha was already there, above him, ready. One swing of the kukri and the man fell. Others tried to form a line to fight back. But the jungle was not flat. Fallen logs and hidden pits made them trip. Thick vines tangled their feet. They fired their rifles blindly, bullets hitting nothing but dirt and leaves. The Gurkha waited for the right moment. Patience was his greatest weapon. He led them deeper into the trap, toward a small ravine covered in vines and branches. The Japanese did not see the hidden obstacles. Their confidence drained with every step. Fear began to rule them. Suddenly, a rope of vines snapped. A soldier fell into the ravine, tumbling down the steep slope. Others tried to help him, but more fell. Panic turned into chaos. The soldiers shouted at each other, arguing, blaming. Above, the Gurkha moved like a shadow. Silent. Deadly. Come. He watched, waited, and struck only when necessary. Each attack was quick. Each strike precise. The jungle itself seemed alive, guiding his hands, hiding his movements, aiding him in every way. He became part of the forest. He was no longer just a man. He was a force of nature, a shadow of death, a nightmare in human form. By midnight, the Japanese soldiers were broken. Their morale shattered. Only a few remained. They whispered in fear, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid to make a sound. The Gurkha crouched behind a fallen tree, observing the chaos. He was not tired. He was not hungry. He did not think about the bodies around him. He thought only of the next move. The trap was working perfectly. Then from the darkness he heard movement. A group of soldiers tried to flank him, thinking they had found a hidden path. The Gurkha did not panic. He had anticipated this. He leapt from his hiding place, striking two men in one swift move. The rest froze, unsure what to do. Fear made them weak. Confusion made them slower. The Gurkha used every advantage. One by one the soldiers fell. The jungle echoed with their brief cries, then silence returned. The trap had worked perfectly. The Gurkha stood in the center of the clearing, kukri in hand, surveying the scene. Only a handful of Japanese soldiers were left. They did not dare approach. They were trapped, defeated, humiliated. Above him, the moonlight broke through the leaves, casting silver shadows. The Gurkha's face was calm. His eyes were sharp. His breathing steady. He had turned the enemy's confidence into fear, their strength into weakness, their numbers into chaos. Tonight, the jungle had chosen its warrior. Tonight, the lone Gurkha had become a legend. But he did not celebrate. He did not smile. There was still more to do. He had survived the trap, but the enemy was still alive. And tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new dangers. For now, the Gurkha disappeared into the shadows, blending with the jungle, waiting for the next move, ready to strike again. The Japanese would remember this night forever. But the Gurkha remembered only one thing: honor, courage, and survival. And in the jungle of Burma, that was enough. Night fell over the Burma jungle like a heavy curtain. The moon tried to shine through the thick canopy, but only scattered light reached the forest floor. Darkness covered everything. Shadows moved in every direction, and the sounds of the jungle became sharper, louder, alive. The Gurkha crouched in the shadows, blending perfectly with the trees. His kukri rested in one hand. His rifle hung loosely at his side. His eyes moved slowly, scanning, reading every movement. He did not rush. He did not panic. He was patient, silent, deadly. The Japanese soldiers were terrified. Only a few remained from the group he had trapped earlier. They whispered to each other, voices trembling, eyes wide. Every shadow seemed to contain death. Every leaf rustle was a threat. Where is he?" one whispered in fear. "I don't know," another replied. "It's just a spirit, a demon in the jungle." The Gurkha heard them clearly. He smiled faintly, not for pride but for focus. He knew fear was his weapon now. They were no longer soldiers. They were prey. He moved silently along a fallen log, stepping carefully on leaves and mud that made no sound. One Japanese soldier lifted his rifle and fired blindly. The bullet missed. The Gurkha did not react. He did not flinch. He simply waited. Then, with the speed of a striking snake, he leapt from the shadows. One strike of his kukri and a soldier fell. No scream escaped, only a soft thud. The others froze. They did not move. They dared not look. The Gurkha vanished again. The jungle swallowed him. The silence returned. The enemy tried to regroup. They whispered, arguing, blaming each other. They fired their rifles, hoping the flash or sound would scare him. But the Gurkha knew the jungle too well. Every tree, every branch, every shadow was an ally. Every sound could be used against them. He waited. A soldier stepped on a dry twig. Snap. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the dark. Others froze. They searched the jungle nervously, hearts pounding. The Gurkha was above them now, crouched on a thick branch. He dropped silently onto the nearest man. The kukri flashed in the moonlight. Another soldier fell. Panic spread like fire. Confusion ruled. They could not see him. They could not predict his movements. They were trapped in darkness, surrounded by death they could not understand. Hours passed. The jungle was alive with fear. The Japanese soldiers whispered, arguing, calling for officers who were already dead or lost. They tried to form lines, but every attempt failed. Every step forward brought them closer to death. The Gurkha moved like a shadow, striking silently. 1, 2, 3 soldiers fell without warning. The remaining soldiers were paralyzed. They could not see, could not hear, could not trust anything. Every shadow could be him. Every movement could be their last. The Gurkha's patience was perfect. He did not waste energy. He did not make unnecessary moves. Every attack was precise, quick, and terrifying. He led them deeper into the jungle, toward a narrow ravine filled with fallen logs and sharp rocks. The Japanese soldiers, confused and terrified, followed unknowingly. One misstep and they would fall. One slip and they would die. He waited at the edge, hidden in darkness. The first soldier fell into the ravine with a scream that quickly stopped. The others tried to help, but in the chaos, more fell. Panic turned into full-blown terror. They were no longer organized soldiers. They were hunted men. The Gurkha struck from above, using his kukri and rifle as needed. The night was his ally. Silence was his weapon. Fear was his tool. Every move was calculated to confuse and dominate. By midnight, the Japanese soldiers were broken. Only a few remained. Their morale was gone. Their confidence shattered. They whispered in fear, eyes wide, trembling. They dared not move. They dared not breathe. Above them, the Gurkha crouched on a tree branch, watching, waiting, breathing slowly, calm as the darkness around him. He was not proud. He was not celebrating. He was focused. The jungle was his battlefield. The enemy's fear was his weapon. He moved again. A single strike. Another soldier falls. Silence. Then another. And another. By the early hours of dawn, Only a handful of Japanese soldiers were left alive. They huddled together, too afraid to move, too afraid to see the faces of their fallen comrades. They had entered the jungle confident and strong. They would leave it broken, terrified, and humbled. The Gurkha watched them. His eyes were sharp, his breathing steady. He had turned the enemy's numbers into weakness, their confidence into fear, their weapons into nothing. The jungle echoed with the silence of terror. The few survivors would carry this night in their minds forever. The Gurkha had become more than a soldier. He had become a shadow of death, a force of nature, a living nightmare. And yet he was still human. His hands were tired. His body ached. His stomach growled. But his spirit was unbroken. He had survived the night. And tomorrow he would continue. Because in the jungle of Burma, 1944, survival was not enough. Honor demanded victory. Courage demanded action. And the lone Gurkha would give both. The night ended with the jungle silent once more. Only the whispers of leaves and the distant cries of birds broke the quiet. But somewhere deep in the shadows the Gurkha waited. Waiting for the next move. Waiting for the next attack. Waiting for the enemy to make one mistake. Because in the darkness the Gurkha was unstoppable. And the legend of the lone warrior grew with every shadow, every silence, every heartbeat of fear. Dawn had not yet broken. The jungle of Burma was dark and quiet, but the air was thick with fear. The Japanese soldiers, once confident and organized, were scattered, trembling, and uncertain. Their disciplined ranks were gone. Every sound, every shadow, every movement kept them on edge. The Gurkha moved silently through the undergrowth. He was calm. He was focused. He was not a man running for survival. He was a hunter, and the enemy was his prey. The remaining Japanese soldiers huddled together, whispering, eyes wide with terror. We should retreat," one said. His voice shook. "No," another whispered. "The others, they are gone. We can't leave yet. We must fight." They were wrong. They could not fight. Not tonight. Not here. Not against him. The Gurkha had become more than a soldier. He was a shadow, a nightmare, a force that turned fear into a weapon. He crouched behind a thick tree, watching them stumble through the mud, tripping over roots and fallen logs. Every step they took was uncertain, slow, controlled by fear. A young Japanese soldier raised his rifle, pointing it in the dark. "Maybe we can shoot him," he said nervously. He fired. The bullet missed by inches. The Gurkha did not move. He waited. Patience was his greatest ally. The soldier tried again. Another miss. Then the Gurkha struck. He appeared from the shadows like a ghost. One swift movement of his kukri, and the soldier fell silently. The others froze. They could not see him, could not hear him. Panic spread. "This is impossible," one whispered. "It is a ghost." Another shook his head. "No, it is just one man, one demon of the jungle." The Gurkha used their fear. He whispered low, moving silently behind them. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, he made it sound like many soldiers were surrounding them. Their imagination did the rest. The soldiers began arguing. "Who's there?" one shouted. "Move forward," another replied. But fear had frozen their minds. They could not move. Every shadow seemed to hide death. Every sound made them jump. They fired bullets randomly, hitting nothing but mud and trees. The Gurkha struck again. One by one, soldiers fell or stumbled, some falling into pits, some tripping over roots. Confusion became chaos. Hours passed. The soldiers were broken. Their confidence was gone. Their morale shattered. Some sat down, trembling, too afraid to continue. Others tried to move forward but fell or froze. The Gurkha crouched on a fallen log, surveying the scene. He did not need to attack everyone. The fear itself was stronger than his kukri. Every step they took into the jungle, every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch, reminded them they were not in control. From a distance, faint voices of other Japanese units could be heard. They shouted, searching for survivors. But the survivors were lost, scattered, hiding, too terrified to respond. The Gurkha moved again, silent as the wind. A soldier tried to sneak away, thinking he could escape. One step into the undergrowth and the Gurkha was there. The strike was silent, precise, final. Another scream, another silence. The few remaining Japanese soldiers huddled together. They whispered frantic orders to each other, blaming each other for the losses. Fear had destroyed their ability to lead or fight. They could not trust their senses. They could not trust their comrades. Above them, the Gurkha crouched on a thick branch, watching, waiting. His breath was steady. His hands were ready. He did not feel anger. He did not feel pride. Only focus. Only survival. Only honor. The jungle was alive around him. Every leaf, every branch, every sound worked for him. The enemy had become a prisoner of fear. Their minds, more than their bodies, were defeated. By morning, only a few Japanese soldiers remained. They were pale, trembling, broken. They had survived, but only barely. Their confidence, their courage, their strength, all gone. They whispered about the man in the jungle. He is not human, one said. He is a shadow, another replied. The Gurkha did not listen. He did not respond. He had survived the night. He had won the battle without needing to fight every man. The fear he had created had done most of the work. He descended silently from the tree. His kukri was clean. His rifle was ready. The jungle was quiet. The enemy was weak. And yet he did not celebrate. He did not shout. He did not smile. Survival was not enough. Honor demanded more. Courage demanded more. He moved through the jungle, leaving no trace. The few Japanese survivors huddled together, trembling, whispering stories they would carry forever. Stories of a man who was everywhere and nowhere at once. Stories of a soldier who turned fear itself into a weapon. The Gurkha had done what no army could do. He had turned the jungle into a trap, silence into a weapon, and fear into a storm. And in that storm only he remained calm. Only he remained human. By the time the sun began to rise over the thick canopy, the jungle was quiet again. Only the cries of distant birds and the rustling leaves broke the silence. The Japanese survivors had lost more than men. They had lost hope, confidence, and pride. The Gurkha moved on. His mission was not yet complete. The enemy would continue to come, but he would be ready. Because in the jungle of Burma, 1944, fear was more powerful than bullets. And the lone Gurkha had mastered it. The legend of the lone warrior grew with every heartbeat of terror, every shadow in the jungle, and every whisper of fear among the enemy. He was not just a soldier. He was the nightmare the Japanese would never forget. And he was only beginning. The jungle of Burma was quiet, but the air was heavy. Smoke from broken fires drifted through the trees. The ground was littered with the fallen, both Japanese soldiers and the few who had survived the night. The morning sun barely pierced the thick canopy, painting the jungle in muted gold and shadow. The Gurkha moved slowly, each step careful, alert. His kukri was sharp in his hand. His rifle hung ready on his shoulder. His uniform was torn, his boots caked with mud, his hands bleeding from cuts on branches and fallen trees. Yet his eyes were calm, steady, focused. He had survived nights of terror, hours of fear, and countless enemy attacks. Now only a few Japanese soldiers remained, the strongest, the bravest, or perhaps the most desperate. They had regrouped and were approaching, determined to finish what the jungle had forced them to abandon. The Gurkha crouched behind a fallen log. He listened. Footsteps in the mud. Voices low, tense, full of fear but also anger. Their discipline had returned, but their confidence had not. They were cautious now, aware that every step could be their last. The first soldier appeared in the clearing. His eyes searched, scanning the jungle, rifle raised. The Gurkha held his breath. One strike, one movement, and it would be over. He waited. Patience had been his weapon all along. The soldier moved closer, unaware of the trap hidden in the shadows. A second soldier followed. A third. They were careful, but fear slowed them, clouded their senses. The Gurkha saw every weakness, every hesitation. Then he attacked. He leapt from the shadows with the speed of a striking cobra. The first soldier fell silently, kukri flashing in the dim light. The second fired blindly, missing completely. The Gurkha rolled, struck, and moved again. Within seconds, one soldier was down, another disarmed, a third frozen in shock. But now they were organized. The remaining soldiers circled him, trying to cut off his escape. They had learned from the night. They had survived fear. They had regrouped. The Gurkha smiled faintly. He had expected this. He ran through the jungle, ducking low, leaping over roots, sliding down muddy slopes. Every step was calculated. Every movement precise. The soldiers tried to follow, but the jungle was unfamiliar to them. The fallen trees, the twisted roots, the narrow paths, all were weapons in the Gurkha's hands. One soldier fired, and the bullet grazed his shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he did not stop. Blood trickled down his arm. His grip on the kukri tightened. He would not falter. He could not falter. A sudden rustle in the leaves to his left. Another soldier lunged. The Gurkha spun, slashing with his kukri. The enemy fell, screaming, then silence. The remaining soldiers were fewer now. Exhausted, injured, terrified. They realized this was no ordinary fight. This was a battle against a man who was unstoppable, a force they could not comprehend. The Gurkha led them to a narrow clearing. The sunlight barely touched the ground. He had prepared this spot. Fallen logs, hidden roots, mud pits, all perfect for the final stand. The first soldier stepped into the clearing and fell into a pit. Another tripped over a root. The Gurkha was already above, moving silently along the branches. One strike, one kill. Another soldier screamed, falling into the mud. The last few soldiers tried to form a line. Rifles ready, eyes wide. But the Gurkha was everywhere at once. He moved like a shadow, striking from angles they could not predict. Every attack precise, every movement calculated. One soldier charged. The Gurkha met him, kukri in hand. They fought hand to hand, each blow deadly. The soldier was strong, but the Gurkha was faster, sharper, more focused. A final strike and it was over. The battlefield fell silent. Only the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds broke the quiet. The Gurkha stood alone, bloodied, tired, wounded. His uniform torn, his hands bleeding, his body aching. But he had won. Every enemy soldier in the immediate area had been defeated. The jungle was quiet again. He looked at the bodies. He did not feel triumph or joy. He felt focus. He felt honor. Every move, every strike had been necessary. Every action had been precise. He had survived, yes, but more than that, he had protected his comrades by standing alone. The British forces would soon return to this part of the jungle. They would find the aftermath. They would see the fear, the chaos, the destruction. And they would tell stories of a man who stood alone against an army and survived. The Gurkha wiped blood from his kukri and checked his rifle. His body was tired, but his mind was still alert. He moved silently, disappearing into the undergrowth, leaving no trace. The surviving Japanese soldiers who had fled would carry the legend of the jungle demon. They would whisper about the man who struck from shadows, moved like a ghost, and survived against impossible odds. They would never forget. But the Gurkha did not think of legend. He did not think of fame. He thought only of honor, courage, and survival. The jungle had tested him. The enemy had challenged him. And he had answered. He had refused to retreat. He had faced the impossible. And he had won. The sun rose higher, casting light on the muddy battlefield. The jungle seemed to breathe again, alive and quiet. The war would continue elsewhere. Soldiers would march, battles would rage, empires would fall. But the story of the lone Gurkha, his kukri, and the final stand in the Burma jungle would live forever. He moved on, silent and invisible, a single figure in a vast, dangerous world. The legend of the lone warrior was complete. But his story, his honor, would never end. The jungle of Burma was quiet once more. The morning sun filtered through the thick canopy, painting the mud, leaves, and fallen trees with soft light. The cries of birds returned. The rustle of leaves carried on the wind. Nature moved on, indifferent to the horrors that had passed. The battlefield was littered with the fallen. Japanese soldiers lay silent, their confidence shattered. Only a few survivors had fled into the dense jungle, terrified and broken. They would carry the story of the lone Gurkha for the rest of their lives. A man who had faced an army and survived. But the Gurkha himself was nowhere to be seen. He moved through the undergrowth silently, his kukri sharp, his rifle slung across his shoulder. His uniform was torn, his hands bloody, his body exhausted, yet his eyes were calm. His mission was complete, but he did not linger. Honor demanded humility. Courage demanded action. Survival demanded discretion. Soon, British forces returned to the area. They moved cautiously, stepping over fallen branches, scanning the forest floor. The officers stopped as they took in the scene. Muddy footprints led through the undergrowth. Bodies lay scattered. The soldiers whispered among themselves, voices tense. Who did this?" one asked. "Impossible," another muttered. It must have been a group, an entire squad. They searched carefully, finding no trace of the Gurkha. He had vanished as silently as he had appeared. Stories began immediately. Officers spoke in hushed tones. Soldiers who had witnessed shadows, movements, and strikes whispered about a man who was everywhere and nowhere. They described a soldier who moved like a ghost, struck like a storm, and disappeared like the wind. "Did one man really do this?" a young soldier asked. "Yes," said an officer. "One man. A Gurkha." The word Gurkha carried weight. Fearless, loyal, legendary. News of the lone warrior spread quickly through the ranks. Soldiers told their comrades. Officers reported to headquarters. The Japanese soldiers who survived told stories of a demon in the jungle, a man who could not be killed, a shadow that hunted them through the night. But the Gurkha did not seek recognition. He did not seek medals. He did not even speak of the battle. For him, honor was enough. Courage was enough. Survival was enough. He walked alone, following the trails he had memorized, the jungle becoming his guide. Every step was careful. Every sound was noted. He checked his wounds, adjusted his uniform, and continued. The enemy was defeated, but the war was far from over. There would be more battles, more soldiers, more challenges. Yet he was ready. The soldiers he had saved would remember him. The enemy would fear him. And the jungle itself seemed to respect him, quiet, calm, as if acknowledging his victory. That night, he camped near a small stream, drinking water, cleaning his kukri, and reflecting silently. He did not feel pride. He did not feel fear. Only focus. Only honor. Only a quiet determination to continue fighting for what was right. Stories began to form outside the jungle. Officers told of a soldier who had refused to retreat, who had faced 200 Japanese soldiers alone, who had survived the impossible. They called him fearless, unstoppable, legendary. Historians would later record his deeds. Soldiers would retell the story for decades. The name of the Gurkha became more than a name. It became a symbol of courage, honor, and the indomitable human spirit. The young soldier who survived the night wrote in his journal, "I do not know if he was human or something more. But one man alone changed the course of the battle. The jungle itself seemed to fight for him. And we were lucky to witness it." The Gurkha continued his journey, disappearing into the dense jungle, moving silently like a shadow. His fight was not over. The war would continue, but he had proven that courage, skill, and determination could overcome impossible odds. And so the legend was born. One man had stood where thousands would have faltered. One man had faced fear, death, and overwhelming odds, and survived. One man had refused to retreat. The world would remember him not just as a soldier but as a symbol. A reminder that even in the darkest jungles, against the strongest enemies, the human spirit could shine brighter than any weapon, faster than any bullet, and more deadly than any army. The Gurkha's shadow stretched long in the morning light, disappearing into the depths of the jungle. And though he vanished from sight, his story would never vanish from history. The lone warrior had become a legend. And the jungle, silent and watchful, carried the tale forever.